Good morning and welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Sheridan's worship service on July 12th, 2020. Are there any announcements coming in?
Not right now, but if they come in over the next little bit.
Great. We'll come back to them if any come in. I can quote Jules from a few months ago, nearly everything's canceled. Hers was different. I have an opening reading for you. Actually, back up a moment. Last week, I did not explain the month's theme very well. The theme for July is freedom and responsibility. The first 2 weeks are more focused on freedom. The second 2 weeks will be focused more on responsibility. And with that in mind, I now have an opening reading. History, despite its wrenching pain, cannot be unlived, but if faced with courage, need not be lived again. Lift up your eyes upon the day breaking for you. Give birth again to the dream. Maya Angelou. Now we can light our chalice unless there's any announcements coming in.
Not right now. Barbara does say that it's nice and cool in her house and that she bets it's warm in the fellowship hall, but
it's all right.
But
it's actually nice and cool. Thank you for thinking of those of us here.
Are we ready to light the chalice?
Yes. Love is the spirit of this church, and service is its law. To dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, to serve human needs, and to help one another.
Joys and concerns?
Please send us your joys and concerns. I'd like to go ahead and light a general candle for everyone who's dealing with COVID. Maybe people have lost loved ones. May they have strength in this time of difficulty.
I'll light a candle for the heat, which is, I guess, both a joy and a concern. It's nice to feel the warm sun, but the cool mountain waters keep flowing.
Will you light a candle for me? Do a joy. We're planning a camping trip, and so that will be delightful to be able to get up into the mountains this coming week. From Jolynn, she says, wishing Janet a speedy recovery from her fall.
I have a joy for Bruce and Jolynn, if they don't mind my sharing. Their son Doug and his wife Gabriela have made it safely to the country and are quarantining until they get test results for COVID. But it's a blessing to have them here.
That's wonderful. Jolynn says, thank you to the UU community for allowing Doug and Gabriella to quarantine on the property. From Catherine Osborne, a joy for Sheridan UU. I was invited to join your online gathering by my sister-in-law, Catherine Johnson, back in March, and you have been like a lifeline for me.
Great.
Oh, thank you.
It's nice.
Welcome.
I have a few family members like that as well
I'm
who
gonna
are
light
really enjoying that.
Candle for Grace's grandma, Betty Jean, and her mom, Susie Clinch. Yeah, 'cause that's pretty cool to feel like we're all in the same place.
So.
No new ones. I'm gonna light one for gratitude, a joy for Jules helping us out. Grace and I realized that Grace missed a couple of weeks in there, but we had been here every Sunday for 4 months straight, and it just flew by, I guess, and it was fun and interesting. But it's also really nice to have a teammate in that with Jules Craft. So thank you, Jules, for helping us out and sharing the load. And we'll keep it up as long as we need to. So
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
We appreciate you. We really do. Should we let's light one last candle for the joys and concerns that remain in our hearts. And I believe we have a short hymn, number 155.
I only have 2 songs.
Oh, okay.
So should we do the We Shall Overcome?
No, let's do that.
Okay. We're going to do that as closing.
Mhm.
We're going to do the hymn now.
Yes.
Okay. That's what we'll do. Not a problem.
Circle round for freedom, circle round for peace, for all of us imprisoned, circle for release, circle for the planet, circle for each soul, for the children of our children, keep the circle whole. Circle round for freedom, circle round for peace, for all of us imprisoned, circle for release, circle for the planet, circle for each soul, for the children of our children, keep the circle whole. Circle round for freedom, circle round for peace, for all of us imprisoned, circle for release, circle for the planet, circle for each soul, for the children of our children, keep the circle whole.
Welcome back, everyone. A few joys and concerns that came in as we were lighting the final candle. We're going to light a couple more. So a concern for Matt's wrist, which is swelling, and they're not sure why. Hope for a quick recovery. From Kabir Hartwig, we'll light a candle for a joy, for us to be in Wyoming, And closer to you all, Chuck and Kabira Hartwig sent that in. And then David Carlson writes in a candle for his granddaughter Emily, who is 21 today.
Thank you for those additional joys and concerns. What we have next is a reading for reflective silence. And since our title today is Freedom of the Vote, our reflection relates to voting. Reasons people vote. I believe voting is a right and a privilege. I believe I have a responsibility to participate in the political process. I want my voice to be heard. It is my civic duty. I care what happens in my country. Please take a few moments to reflect on the reasons you vote. Now we will have today's message. Spirit of life. Could you have this memorized? Yeah, we usually don't have it quite that close together. Now we will go ahead with that message that I'm giving today. My name is Sue Roberts. Most of you probably know me. I've been a member probably 7 or 8 years by now. This has been my spiritual home and my haven and my sanity. So I really enjoy the UU Fellowship. My talk this morning is called Freedom of the Vote. My lifelong commitment to voting began at home. Growing up here in Sheridan, Wyoming, my parents were loyal Republicans, but in this state, before the time when political polarization was so encompassing, the best candidate, and sometimes the only candidate, typically won. Several centrist Democrats were elected governor of Wyoming. In my family, voting was like church, performed regularly as a duty. In 1984, at the age of 16, I embarked on an experience that would forever change my ideas about the political process. I became a US government-sponsored exchange student to then West Germany. I spent 11 months in the country, and because of the Congressional Bundestag co-sponsorship, I had political experiences far beyond the usual American or German citizen. I was able to go on a behind-the-scenes trip to Bundestag, which is the German Congress, with my local representative. I walked right past Willy Brandt, a major politician and a longtime mayor of Berlin, who was regularly on the television. I witnessed a German general election with my host family, where the ballot had only political parties listed rather than individuals. Parties governed by majority or coalition. My fellow gymnasium students, which is a university-bound high school, challenged my Reagan-friendly belief system by showing me a world viewpoint of my country. I was exposed to a country that was far more invested in the well-being of its people. Every family with children received a subsidy per child to help eliminate child poverty. Single-payer health care was available to every citizen free of charge, completely different from the US. I saw humanism and true socialism in practice. Near the middle of my year in Germany, we students in the program traveled to then divided Berlin. Until the split of Germany after World War II, Berlin was the capital city. All over Berlin, the Berlin Wall was imposing and ever present. The eastern side with a desolate no man's land, barbed wire fences, and guard towers. The western side was covered in graffiti, and the city simply went right up to the barrier. There were even floating nets with alarmed sensors in the rivers to prevent swimming across. As part of this trip, we spent a truly sobering day in East Berlin. We crossed the border by rail. In East Berlin territory, our train was bordered by soldiers in uniform and long winter coats, always in pairs. They carried Kalashnikov automatic rifles, and several pairs had German Shepherd dogs to search for contraband. We then exited the train in a path lined by soldiers to the immigrations and customs area, where our passports were well scrutinized. We exchanged our required daily monetary fees into pretty worthless East German marks. Then we set out on foot for several hours in the city. There was very little to purchase. Half the shelves were empty. At that time in the US, that was a new experience. Since COVID, that is not a new experience. And actually, the shelves in East Berlin were similar to the shelves around here during early COVID. There was little desire or anything to do or buy with our required spending money. It seemed that 50% of the population were uniformed soldiers, always in pairs. Everything and everyone seemed to have a gray cast, augmented by ugly cement utilitarian buildings rebuilt after the bombing destruction of World War II. Order, discipline, and oppression permeated the air. The reason the soldiers were always in twos is that because if one of them tried to defect, the other one was supposed to shoot them. So in East Germany, soldiers were always deployed in pairs. We visited a World War II museum with the Soviet bloc version of events. Despite the fact that the Soviets and the Allied troops both fought against Hitler, everything west of the Berlin Wall was fascist. It was certainly a different political spin, The victors not only write history, but determine the political narrative. After a horrible meal in a state-run cafe, it was time to return to the West. Freedom again. I realized that I was incredibly fortunate to be an American and to have opportunity and choices. I vowed to do my best to participate in every election I was eligible for. I had learned how precious my freedom to vote truly was. I understood my responsibility and my privilege. The original freedom of the vote was provided by the Constitution of the United States of America. However, the freedom to cast a vote was only granted to white male landowners, the penultimate white privilege guaranteed by the Constitution. Gradually, and largely due to the influence of Andrew Jackson's ideas of expanding democracy from the 1820s, most white males over the age of 21 were granted the privilege to vote in 1828. Andrew Jackson owned over 300 men, women, and children as slaves during his lifetime. It would be decades for men of color and nearly a century for white women to have the right to vote. Much longer for the civil rights movement and broader access to voting. Equality and access to voting continues to be a problem today. Throughout the 19th century, abolitionists campaigned for African Americans to be free from slavery. The Civil War was fought over slavery. Abraham Lincoln's executive order, the Emancipation Proclamation, was issued on September 22, 1862. It took effect in part of the country on January 1st, 1863, during the Civil War, which continued for over another 2 years. The 15th Constitutional Amendment in 1870 prohibits the use of race, color, or previous servitude in determining voter eligibility. This theoretically enabled Black men to vote. In practice, in many parts of the country, especially the Jim Crow South, this was far from the case. The freedom to vote was limited by poll taxes, literacy tests, residency requirements, and other measures aimed at limiting Black and low-income voters. The next movement with voting was women's suffrage. Women's suffrage included mostly white women. Well-known suffragettes were sometimes blatantly anti-African American. In a blunt statement, Susan B. Anthony said, "I will cut off this right arm before I will ever work or demand the ballot for the Negro and not the woman." Sojourner Truth started traveling the country in the mid-1800s, promoting both abolition of slavery and the right of both Black men and women to vote. Harriet Tubman encouraged the Black vote for all women and men. Activists such as Harriet Fortin Purvis, Mary Ann Shadd Cary, Frances Harper, and Ida B. Wells organized groups and campaigned for the Black women's vote in the late 19th and early 20th century. The white women's vote was established by the 19th Amendment in 1920, which prohibits governments from denying white women the right to vote. Native Americans of either sex were denied voting rights until 1962. Additional strides were made in the freedom to vote by the 24th Amendment in 1964, prohibiting poll taxes. But until Lyndon B. Johnson signed the 1965 Civil Rights Act, people of color faced a gauntlet to vote. The most modern constitutional amendment related to voting was enacted after the draft and youth activism during the Vietnam War. The 26th Amendment in 1971 lowered the eligible voting age to 18. Our current freedom of the vote is challenged by several issues, one being low voter turnout. 60.1% of eligible voters in the 2016 presidential election cast their votes. The voter statistics come from a research organization called the Election Project. If you're interested in the demographics, this is incredibly detailed information available on their website, by state, by county, by any demographic you can imagine. The presence of gerrymandering in legislative districts is also a problem. The largest threat to our freedom of the vote today is dark money in our political process. Election finance reforms have been gutted by the creation of super PACs, which are political action committees. Since the 2010 Supreme Court decision of the Federal Election Commission versus Citizens United, the candidate with the biggest wallet supporting them typically wins an election. Super-sized PACs, obscure political donors, allow huge and even foreign citizen donations and unfairly influence elections. People working to rid the political system of dark money, organizations such as Wyoming Promise, are trying to help change this. Many UUs have lent this movement support. After so much effort spanning 2 centuries to have the freedom to vote for all Americans and efforts to keep elections free and fair, why do so many Americans not vote? The US ranks 31st out of 35 developed countries in voting participation. In the top voter turnout countries, voting is legally required, typically punishable by a small fine, and people are automatically registered from their social security systems. The number one reason people give for not voting, registration takes work. Transportation, verified state photo IDs, proof of residence, and other documentations are required in different states to register to vote. The time interval to the election matters in some states. It's not a simple process. Education is a factor in voting. People with college degrees vote at higher rates than those with less formal education. College grads may have more money, access, and comfort with the registration process. Your friends and relatives also factor in. If people around you vote, you're more likely to vote. Another reason people don't vote is that 2 parties may not be enough for people to feel that their ideas and values are represented by either one. However, no coalition governance is set up in our system, and outside party candidates really have little chance of success in the national. People also state that they don't care about politics and don't feel elections affect their lives. That is apathy. People also have election burnout. Sometimes there are lots of elections close together, too often. Some people feel their votes don't count or don't matter. In the past 2 decades, 2 candidates who won the popular vote for president did not win the office. The Electoral College is an entirely different rabbit hole I will not go down today. But it can be plain frustrating to vote. Many interventions exist to improve voter turnout. Peer pressure helps. Ask those around you if they voted. Those silly stickers, I voted, help, because it's a visual cue to remind people that today is the election day. Educate the young about voting early in their lives and well about why it's important. Personal interactions, face-to-face, are still the best way to encourage voting. Canvassing neighborhoods is highly effective at getting people to vote, whether they agree with the candidates who showed up at their door or the workers who showed up at their door. Participate in the political process. The freedom of the vote for UUs is partially grounded on our watchful application of principle number 4, a responsible search for truth and meaning. We must verify and seek truth in political information. Search to separate super PAC and dark money advertising. We must search to separate super PAC and dark money advertising claims from reality. Find out which candidates align with your values. Our 5th principle, the right of conscience and the use of the democratic process within our congregations and in society at large, is rooted in the freedom to vote. Our hard-won freedom should be exercised regularly and with care. In the upcoming 2020 election, your voice is vital to address the huge problems of climate change, pandemic management, economic insecurity, xenophobia, immigration, racial injustice, and hate. With consideration of our principles, let's use our freedom of the vote. May it be so. Next, we will do the offering. Please remember that checks can be mailed to Ramona Stein at 1590 Sugarland Drive, number B-206, Sheridan, Wyoming, 82801, and online at tithe.lee.com. There are links from both our website and from the YouTube page. Join me in blessing the offering. Let this be an offering to sustain and strengthen this place, which is so sacred to many of us, a community of memory and hope, for we are the keepers of the dream. Closing words I have for you. I have walked that long road to freedom. I have tried not to falter. I have made missteps along the way, but I have discovered the secret that after climbing a great hill, one only finds that there are many more hills to climb. I have taken a moment here to rest, to steal a view of the glorious vista that surrounds me, to look back on the distance I have come. But I can rest only for a moment, for with freedom come responsibilities, and I dare not linger, for my long walk is not yet ended. Nelson Mandela. That's the end of that portion of the service. I'm happy to entertain discussion.
Should we do the song?
Oh,
Here, we'll do the song while people.
we will do the final hymn while you think about discussion.
Okay.
Okay, so just some comments for you, Sue. Barbara Welch says, such a timely message. Thank you. And Jolyn adds on, thank you for sharing your personal experience with us. This is such an important message. PBS is currently showing a 2-part program on the history of the vote, which is so informative too. Good to know. Cameo also says thank you. She also did a shout out. Matt, I hope you get to the resolution of your wrist soon. Welcome, Catherine Osborne, and yay for Doug and Gabriella arriving in Wyoming. And oh no, Janet, yes, speedy recovery. Lovely closing song from
Nice.
Cameo. So
Thanks, everyone. We don't know each other or anything. Everybody cheers for each other in the comments. I like it.
I had something spring to mind when you mentioned gerrymandering. Just this morning, I was watching something that mentioned that more than half of the voters in North Carolina voted for Democratic candidates for their state legislature, and only Republican candidates won. And that's because of the gerrymandering that's gone on in that state. So, like the topic of the video I was watching is about systemic racism. And I just think that it's like monumentally important that those of us who are privileged to, benefit from a history of growing up in white families who've, grown up in white families going back and back and back, step up, check that privilege, and just demand change. Because that's like, if any of us were in that position, we would know we needed all the help that we could get. And, certainly those folks in that position, they're exercising their freedom to vote, but it just doesn't seem to be amounting to much when the deck's so stacked against them. So
That's going to be big voter burnout there. Let's hope North Carolina Democrats still show up for the election, the general election.
mm-hmm.
That's got to be incredibly frustrating. And thank you for that timely addition, Ian.
Yeah, and it makes me think too, as you were going through the history of when the right to vote is granted to different groups of people, sort of what a good reminder it is to think about how much that has happened in recent history. But then to add on to that, like the way things have shifted, that it's not even just a matter of like granting the right to vote, but also like that access can be restricted in so many ways. And so the importance of being informed and staying on top of that is huge, because it's like subverted a little bit more. It's a little bit more obscured, the ways in which the vote is, people are not allowed, don't have access to vote.
Right. And in the time of COVID, we hear all over the country, including our own state, that huge amounts of districts and voting precincts are being collapsed into one, like 10. I think there's in rural Texas something like 30 precincts that are going down to one. And, rural place. There's no bus service. It's not going to be easy for those folks to all get to wherever that one precinct is.
Mm-hmm.
It's really, really tough.
Well, we have that going on here as well. We have, there was an article, and I should know more details about it, but it's the shrinking of the number of voting and polling places just in our own home. So,
and that is partly due to election judges. Availability, and I can't blame anybody for not wanting to be an election judge in a pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
I can't complain about that.
Victor adds, thanks for lifting up voting and our 5th UU principle and sharing your personal experience. Please let folks know about the UUA's initiative, UU the Vote.
Okay. There it
Yes,
is.
yes, there is a UU initiative, UU the Vote. There's information about it in your most recent UU World. and it's also available on the uua.org site. And you can look up any contribution you can make for UUs that are fighting for the rights of people to vote.
Cal just writes in with a comment saying, "Thank you, Sue. Great timing. He's got lots to think about."
Well, Cal, you're always thoughtful, so thank you.
I'll offer too, just the meditation, your invitation to us to reflect on why we vote. I really appreciated that. And I was thinking about all of the reasons that you had shared, and then the idea too of like the apathy and the notion of like, I'm apolitical. It's not for me. I'm not going to be political because it's uncomfortable or whatever the reason may be. And I guess just I was reflecting on my own personal standing, which is that like there is no such thing, like we all play a part in the systems and the society that we're part of, whether or not we sort of like choose to have awareness of the roles we play. And so I appreciate having the opportunity to sort of think back and be grounded in the ways that's connected to values. Because I will admit to having some burnout, some apathy myself just through these tough times. And so I appreciate that.
Well, thank you. I was involved in a project that encouraged people in swing states to vote. And one of the interesting things about it was a large list of why people vote. And it really made me stop and think. Some of those items are from that literature, but it really made me think about it. And some of mine were combinations of different things, but I can really point to my parents just growing up with it. And then, I firmly remember being happy to be in a place where I had freedom after that day in East Berlin. It was so evident. And I was like, wow, I'm going to be involved. I'm going to vote. I'm not going to ever want to be in a place like that.
I could share just a little bit of a similar experience. So right towards the end of the Bush years, I spent a school year in Russia, and Bush felt one way, and I didn't like him or his policies, but certainly it did not compare to the feeling on the ground in Russia, the way that pamphlets blanketed the town supporting Putin, the way that no one questioned the passing of power back and forth between Putin and Medvedev, who was like for a time the prime minister, then he was the president, and they just like passed the titles back and forth to each other for decades, And Medvedev was like clearly no one. Like Putin, whatever role Putin was in, he's been in charge the whole time, and that was totally transparent. No one misunderstood that that's what was happening. And just like the single-minded championing of that man's power and control over the system, without any thought to any of the problematic aspects of having that situation. And it is very comparable to the feeling now in this country. And that disturbs me quite greatly because it was unsafe to be critical of Putin at that time in Russia, and it's only worse now. And the longer that that type of situation festers and dominates the culture, the worse it gets for dissenters. So just I don't know, that's not a very cheerful or encouraging note, but it is hopefully motivating. I was wondering about the thing that you mentioned. It seems like in Wyoming, maybe occasionally there's like an initiative or something that I feel like voting on this can matter. Voting on this can make a difference. But typically I find it like it's completely pointless because there's nobody anymore who I'm going to vote for who's going to win. So what were you mentioning about something where you could reach out to people in swing states? Because it seems like maybe, some phone calls to folks in Colorado might be a better use of my time.
Well, as far as I know, there's a project called Vote Forward, and that was a letter project.
Okay.
It is the main person who has been the point person for that has finished up. Our community provided 2,750 letters to people in swing states, Michigan and Colorado predominantly. Our local project has wound up. If you're still interested, you can look at Vote Forward online and see if you can come up with things. But that personally made me feel like I could do something to influence the vote. And when you're talking about Russia, I have felt recently, they always talk about Russian oligarchs and oligarchy. I think we're incredibly quickly moving down the slippery slope to oligarchy unless the people win the vote back, unless it's really for the people again. And I don't like to see that in my country. I like to see it more free and the voice of the people heard.
Mm-hmm. There's also something called Vote Save America, which was an initiative started by the Pod Save America folks, where you can adopt a swing state. And in COVID times, they're doing a lot of like phone calls and other virtual outreach as well. So I think there are a few different organizations and opportunities to get involved with.
What's it called?
So Vote Save America.
Vote Save.
Yeah.
And there is also the UU, the Vote Initiative. I apologize, I don't know a whole lot about the UU, the Vote Initiative, but those are still running actively. I think we're winding up to where we can extinguish the chalice. Thanks everybody for being with us. There was a Zoom coffee hour to follow. The Zoom link is on your announcement that Victor sends out about the service. Please feel free to pop in and see each other and have Zoom conversation. Thanks. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
Thanks, Sue. We lit all our candles today. Yay.
You got it?
Mm-hmm. No.
All right. Bye, everybody.